guys, this is Krista. Thanks for coming back to our channel. My husband was just asking for some snacks or stuff that he could take to work with him. And so I thought, why not make a batch of his favorite cookies? They're completely off plan. They're not THM Healthy Mama at all, but they were his favorite recipe. And I thought I would, share Sheila's birth story while I made a batch of his cookies. I will preface this birth story by saying I feel like there's a lot of negative references to labor and delivery, and I just felt very, very grateful and blessed for how things went with actually both of my labor and deliveries. I just ask that you not compare it with your own story, because everyone's birth story is just so different. We're all given different experiences that we get to go through, and so I don't know, I just hope to share some tips or things that I found helpful and hope they're encouraging or helpful to you as well. Just a quick rundown of how things went with the pregnancy. I was exercising up until, I want to say the end of the second trimester, and I felt great. I was following the THM Healthy Mama plan for the most part, so sugar-free and staying away from processed flours and stuff like that, and I felt really good. And then we were preparing to sell our house and move, and so everything that came with that, I'm guessing, was just too much for my body. And it was all fun and exciting, but just the pressure of showing the house, just everything that went with that, I think it just took a toll on me. About 26 weeks maybe or so, I started experiencing Braxton Hicks, and those just continued on ultimately through the end of the pregnancy. But then around 32 weeks, we discovered that I was having preterm labor. And so that was concerning because we had no way of knowing if I was going to go into labor soon or if that was going to continue on. So I ended up going on bed rest, like full bed rest. It was amazing. My mother-in-law helped out for a bit. And then my mom was able to actually fly down, and she spent, I think it was 5 weeks. I was on bed rest for 5 weeks. She stayed here for about 2 more weeks because I didn't go into labor right away. Once I reached 36 weeks, we were told that I was good to start moving around. And my biggest concern was working out and everything up until the point where I had to stop. And then I was in bed, literally laying flat for 5 weeks straight. And so I was like, this isn't ideal for labor. So anyways, then I slowly started walking and, doing house projects and, getting ready for the labor. One thing I had asked God was that it would be super obvious when I was going into labor, just because after the first baby, they say you can go into labor very quickly and have things progress and not necessarily realize. And since we were planning to have the delivery at the birth center, I didn't want to take any chances. So I was 38 weeks and 6 days when it was later in the day. We had supper, and I kind of knew something was up. You just kind of have a sense. That evening, my husband and I, there's a local track, and so we went there to walk around. Before this, I had been doing some of the miles circuit, just trying to, get her in the optimal position, stuff like that. We walked around the track a couple of times. As we were walking around the track, this one lady, she kind of looked over and she was like, wow, she looks like she's about to pop or something like that. And it's just kind of funny. You feel like a spectacle, but at that point I didn't really care. And then I was like, why don't we do stairs? So I went up the stairs a couple times, and then I stopped at one point because I was kind of out of breath. And then all of a sudden I felt like my water broke, and I was pretty sure it was that because I had just used the bathroom earlier. And so I was like, oh, this is what it's like. And I was like, honey, look, guess what? And you could see the drops on the pavement, the drops of liquid. And I was like, okay, this is exciting. We texted the midwife, and we, got back in the car and headed home. And then it wasn't until we got home that I had the full gush of water. It was kind of funny because Mom and my husband had gone out to put the car seat in the car, and I had sat down on a chair, and there was this gush, and it was just kept coming and coming and coming. And I was like, somebody better come and wipe this up. But I had picked up a shower curtain, so for the next hour or two, we put the shower curtain on the floor, and then I just kind of leaned on a bouncing ball, one of those big exercise balls. At this point, I was keeping track of the contractions. It was a really good distraction. Things weren't really hurting at all. It was just keeping track of things. And for a while there, it seemed like things were picking up, and then they started slowing down. And the midwife just said, well, just don't wait until thought of getting in the car is like the worst thought. It was funny because actually Curtis decided to make bubble tea. So he did that. I think my mom was making cookies. It was kind of fun because, you know, Dirk was in bed and it was in the evening where we were just kind of like, oh, this is exciting, you know? And then I had just kind of like last minute, like, you know, was directing them, can you go grab this? Can you grab that? And throw this in that bag, grab that food. We kind of had things packed, but there was still some last minute things, you know, you just have to wait till the end to grab those. Then we got in the car and then we headed to the birthing center about 9:45, I want to say. Maybe we got there around 9:45. It wasn't too far away, thankfully. And we went in there and my contractions weren't like too bad. They were definitely getting more intense, but they weren't like terrible or anything. It was really nice. Our midwife, she just kind of hung out in the room next to us, and there was kind of a living room area, and we were in this bedroom. So Curtis, you know, he brought in the Bluetooth speaker and the stuff, and we got that going, and that was really nice. I really liked having music playing during just the whole process. I felt like it was a really good distraction. I guess I'm the kind of person, I just kind of get into a zone when I'm in labor, and I don't really like to talk, or I don't mind if other people talk, if that doesn't bother me, but I very much get very serious and just very quiet and just, you know, focus. And one of the things that I had heard on a podcast, which I can link the podcast in the description, it's by Nancy Campbell. She had her granddaughter Meadow, and she talked about some of the things that helped her in labor, and one of them was to remember to keep her hands open and to not clench them up. And it's crazy how you can just do stuff without even thinking, like tighten muscles or clench up when you feel discomfort. It was a helpful thing for me to remember, just to keep my hands loose. And so I would kind of every once in a while wiggle my fingers around, and then it was kind of like a signal to the rest of my body. I felt like just relax. And every time the contractions came, it was like, just relax. And I also realized one way to kind of handle the pressure and everything was to remember that the contraction was the most intense at the start, and then it would fizzle out. So when each contraction hit, I was like, oh, okay, this is, you know, this is kind of intense, but it's gonna loosen up. And I just told myself that repeatedly, and that really helped. So after the first little bit, we noticed that the contractions were kind of fizzling off, or they were just very sporadic all over the place. And my husband was like talking about how tired he was, and I was like, we're just starting this. And then he was like, well, maybe you should lay on the bed. And I was like, no, I'm not laying on the bed. Like, you just want me to do that so you can go to sleep. And which was kind of true, but it actually ended up after a bit, you know, we tried it and it was kind of nice. I was able to lay on my side and then he could rub my back, which was a helpful distraction more than anything. At that point, we noticed that the contractions started to get more regular and intense, and I was like, oh, this is great, this is awesome. And I had been there a couple hours. The midwife had offered to fill the birthing tub, but I really wasn't into that. The water's not as hot as I like it, which obviously you don't probably want the water crazy hot, but I was just like, I'm gonna be cold. No, I don't want to do that. So it actually got to a point where I was just like, there's so much pressure. For one thing, I will say, I never allowed myself to get to the point where I was like, this hurts really bad. Because I knew once I hit that point, it would get way worse. I'd heard so many stories, and I know with Dirk, I did this too, where I allowed myself to acknowledge the pain and to say, this hurts really bad. Ultimately followed that train of thought, like it got worse. And I would refer to it as pressure or intensity, and I told Curtis, this labor is exhausting. And I had a couple contractions where they would double peak, or some of them lasted like 5 minutes, and then I'd have a 3-minute break, and it was just, some of them were crazy. But I just tried to remember, keep my fingers loose, and to just kind of do low sounds, really, really low sounds. So that really helped. Then there was a point it got to where it was just like the contractions, they just seemed to go kind of crazy. And I was thinking, okay, maybe it would be nice to get in the tub, because I figured the contractions would slow down and maybe I'd get a little bit of a break. So we had the midwife come and she checked me, and I was 9.5 centimeters. And so I was like, okay, never mind. Let's just finish this off. And so it was shortly after that I felt like I was ready to push. And with Sheila, I was like, the sooner I can get her out, the better. They cleared me. My body was ready to do it. And she came in about 3 pushes. It was very short. I guess with Dirk, I torn a bunch, but with Sheila, there was none of that. I'd say the hardest part after delivering Sheila was getting the placenta out, just because it seemed like the placenta was loose, but because of the positioning of my uterus and everything, it wasn't coming. And just like with Dirk, I lost a ton of blood, and the midwife was working, you know, trying out all kinds of different things. I moved around, I stood up, changed positions. Finally, she was able to get the placenta out, and then you're kind of in that afterglow where you're just like laying there, you have the baby, and yeah. Sheila had a really short umbilical cord, so they couldn't put her on my chest because she couldn't reach it. So they put her next to me, and that was neat. I want to say it was about 1 o'clock in the morning. So when my water broke to when she was born was 6 hours, which was pretty remarkable. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it encouraging. If you did, I would ask that maybe you would share something interesting from maybe one of your labor and deliveries, a random fact or something like that. And if you wouldn't mind subscribing and liking this video, that would be awesome.